there. And I actually remember this point when I was in Moscow, and I'm sitting at an Airbnb that I got, and it was summertime, and I'm sitting there, it's like on the roof, and I'm watching the sunset, and I'm thinking, I'm not very happy, and I'm thinking, like, why not? Like, I have basically the life of my dreams. I don't really have to work anymore. I'm still young. I have the world at my fingertips, but I wasn't very happy. I was kind of depressed. And the reason was that I didn't have a job and I didn't have anything to do. And that's what was really making me upset and depressed. And kind of, I just had this negative outlook on life because I didn't have a purpose anymore.
Hey, this is Paul from FreightCaviar, and you're listening to the Daily FreightCaviar podcast, where I interview people from the logistics industry on freight tech, outsourcing, and other interesting topics. If you want to check out more FreightCaviar content, go to FreightCaviar.com.
Added, embellish.
Yeah, the stick figure especially is awesome.
That's a very key
What do you have there, Leo?
engineering.
What do you have on the whiteboard?
On the whiteboard?
Yeah.
Well, so this is called a sequence diagram, which describes a given workflow. In this case, we were talking about tracking and visibility, and just talking about how does a customer initiate a tracking request, and how do we find the driver that's actually driving it? How do we send them updates? All that sort of stuff. So this is a very common diagram that we use to kind of document the flow of the system.
Sure. And you're integrating with MacroPoint?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you see that here? Yeah. So
Yeah,
MacroPoint, yes, one of the providers. MacroPoint, Four Kites is another one. And yeah, part of the challenge with building our system is that we have to do so many integrations, and because of that, we really have to invest in our integration infrastructure so that we kind of look at them as plugins rather than each integration being its whole separate part of the system. So yeah, we have a lot of integrations already. We have a lot more left to do, and so we're just working at it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to introduce you, Leo. We got Leo Gorodinski. Leo is the co-founder and chief technology officer at Alvis, a new transportation management software. And Leo, you also came from Jet.com, apparently the first employee, VP of engineering at Jet.com. So pretty fascinating background. Could you tell us, Leo, more about, I guess, where you come from, your experience, and how you started at Jet.com?
Yeah. So most of my experience was in e-commerce. So by the time I joined Jet, I was working at an e-commerce company in Boulder, Colorado. And so this company, I started there in 2005. I was still in college, and what we were trying to do is that companies build storefront technology to offer as a service. So kind of like what Shopify became. That's what we set out to do, is build this platform that allows anybody to create a storefront, and we were called Storefront Services. But then we pivoted a bit as a company, and we actually started running our own storefronts, and we had several websites based on our storefront technology. The one that became most successful was called DrillSpot, and it was a tooling industrial supply kind of website, kind of the stuff you see on Home Depot. And so that was a really good experience for me, because we just built the whole thing ourselves. We just built the whole technology, built our own website, and made it possible to customize it. We had a whole system on the back end to send out the orders to the proper supplier, organize and clean the data. So it was a major operation. And for me, it was a great experience because I got a chance to build a lot of different things very hands-on. And e-commerce, it's such a wide arena, and there's so many different kinds of technologies involved in running what looks to be like a simple website. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of challenges. For example, there's a lot of challenges in terms of cleaning and organizing the product data. And there's challenges in making sure that you send out the orders on time so that they get delivered on time, and just all over the place. Search is a very complicated problem. And so I was doing that for a pretty long time. I was at that company for what was it, 8 years. I was there for 8 years, and around 2013, I was kind of thinking about moving on. We actually had a good amount of success as a drill spot, where a few years after launching, we were approached by one of our suppliers, which was Granger, this industrial supplier, industrial parts supplier. We were approached by them to be acquired because they wanted us to be their kind of way into the e-commerce space, because they're B2B and they saw that we were selling a lot of their stuff. So they're like, hey, we want to buy you guys. And so this was in 2008. And we were, we had no idea what we were doing. And we decided, no, we don't want to be bought. And so we kind of kept moving. But then eventually what Granger did is they built their own website and priced us out. And so the company kind of plateaued. And I've been thinking about moving on to something else. I kind of wanted to move to San Francisco because I thought that's where all the action was. And I just wanted to do something else. And I connected with the Jet CTO, Mike Hanrahan, where he found some of my online blog posts, my activity on Stack Overflow, and he kind of thought I might be a good fit.
What were you writing on the blog posts?
All sorts of stuff about software development. So they were concrete blog posts about like, this is one methodology, like functional programming or doing distributed systems, or a lot of the stuff around designing these kinds of applications. Like, how do you write the code in a way that allows you to support all the functions that you want, but still make it maintainable? So it was just kind of just standard software development stuff is what I was writing about. And so then I interviewed. I spoke with Mike Hanrahan, and then I spoke with the other founders of Jet. Nate Faust was the chief operating officer. He was also a co-founder. And then Mark Laurie. I spoke to him. And at that point, it wasn't even called Jet. The name of the company was actually Blue Rocket. It was going to be, it was going to be called rocket.com, not jet.com. There's a whole story about how we were trying to buy that domain name, but the company that owned it wanted or in fact, they wouldn't even sell it for $10 million. So we had to come up with a new name for the company, and we tried a few different things. And some of the thinking behind the name was that it should be short and quick to say. It also should be something that doesn't directly explain what we're doing, but something we could build a brand around. And so I remember one option, I'm glad we didn't take it, was going to be called Hippo, like a hippo. That was another option, but or Mojo was another one that we talked about, but I'm glad we landed on Jet as the name. So anyway, I interviewed with what was to become Jet. And
just real quickly, sorry to interrupt you, but how much did you pay for jet.com?
I think that was around $2 million.
I could imagine this must have been a lot.
Yeah, so that was $2 million, but they were prepared to pay $10 million for rocket.com. So that was like a steal.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that was a steal.
Short, 3 letters, jet.com.
Yeah, it was short. It was a great name. It kind of sounds cool, and a lot of marketing we can do around that. And so I started to interview, and it was very clear to me that the people I was speaking to, Mike Hanrahan, Nate Faust, and Mark Laurie, these guys, they knew what they were doing. Like, they were a very experienced team. So it wasn't like a typical startup where like you're in the basement, you don't know what's going on and all that stuff. They were like, they just came out of selling a company to Amazon called Quidsy. They just sold Quidsy, and some of them worked there at Amazon for a while, and now they're trying this new thing. And so they had the financing, they had the plan and everything. So I spoke to them. I was like, wow, these guys know what they're doing. Now, I didn't necessarily see the business case for it because they were basically trying to build a competitor to Amazon. And, that just does not seem realistic, right? It's like, how are you actually going to do that? Because, we didn't really have any concrete technical advantages. And so it seemed like a long shot, but I just felt like this team, whatever they're going to do, I want to be a part of it. And so I interviewed, I got the job, and then I started in August of 2013. And we did actually work in a basement for a while because we didn't have our first office ready yet. and we worked out of the CTO's basement for like 2 months. So
In
we
what
did have
city?
so this was in New Jersey. So our first office was
Okay.
in Montclair, New Jersey. But
Pretty
this,
random place for like a logistics company startup. You think usually
it's
Silicon Valley, LA, it's like
yeah.
a random place.
Yeah, it's a random place. I mean, so part of it is that the founding team, they were in that area, and they kind of founded the Quidsy before in the same area. And part of it was also kind of, I think, to some extent, a statement saying, hey, we don't have to be in Silicon Valley. We could just build a team here. And there was this whole angle about New York being called the Silicon Alley, not Silicon Valley. So I don't know how true that became. But yeah, it was a little bit unusual because on top of the fact that we were technically in the greater New York area, but our office was in New Jersey. And it was close to the city, but we were in a town called Montclair, New Jersey. And it's about 30 minutes by train from actually New York City. So we were there for a couple of years. Eventually, we moved to Hoboken, New Jersey, which is right on the river. So that's basically the same thing as being in the city. But for a couple of years, we worked out of a little area in Montclair. It's a little town, and there's no real tech companies there. But it was, it was a great experience, and I think we kind of look back on that time very fondly.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's how I got involved with Jet. And like I was saying, I was basically the first hire, but there was like 3 of us that were around right at the beginning. Then we hired 2 more, and for several months it was just the co-founders and the engineers, and we were starting out, building the platform, kind of setting the foundation for the rest of the team to come and build on top of that. And yeah, so that's how that started at Jet.
This was 2013 when you started, and then it sold in 2020. I mean, what was the process like? You sit down, you're there with the co-founders. Like, where were you guys at mentally? What was like the process where you came in? What were you struggling on, and what were you trying to achieve?
So so we were acquired in 2016.
Oh, okay.
Not 2020. So yeah, so we started building this thing in
3 years.
Yeah, and it was actually, so it all happened very, very quick. So I started in August of 2013, and then we launched the system to the public essentially in 2 years. It was in July of 2015 that we launched it to the public. Now, that whole year up until that point, we were already operating the system in a kind of a demo fashion. So we had actual customers that were buying, but it was kind of like a trial period. But we launched in 2015, and basically a year later, we were acquired by Walmart. Oh. And so at the beginning, before we even launched, our vision was that we were going to build a competitor to Amazon, and we had our goals set on having 20 billion in revenue annually by 2020. So that was the vision. That's what we were going for.
We said 20 million, right? Or 20 billion?
20 billion.
20 billion, okay.
20 billion, yeah.
Okay.
So that was the goal. And that's kind of what we all joined there to do, is to just build this company and try to grow it. We had a slightly different business model at the beginning. Initially, it was going to be kind of like a Costco type of thing, where you pay a membership fee to shop on Alvis, but then like all the shipping is free. And we actually had an interesting model where the idea was that they pay a membership fee, but then we sell everything at cost.
Okay.
And so we make all the money on the membership fee. Everything else is very transparent. It's just passing down the cost to the customer. And so we had some cool technical gadgets to go with it. One of the things that was a cornerstone of our technology, so to say, was we had this pricing algorithm that would always be looking at your shopping cart and reevaluating the best way to fulfill it to try to get you the lowest cost. So the basic example is that sometimes if you have 2 items in your cart, individually, they might be cheaper from one supplier, but if you bulk order from another one together, it's going to be cheaper overall. And so that's actually not something e-commerce companies do, right? They'll find you the best price on this one product by the time you add it to the cart. They don't tend to look at the whole cart and try to reshuffle the suppliers to get you the maximum price. We did some analytics, and we found that this could actually reduce the price of a cart by like 10% or something like that. So we were kind of pushing that as a cool aspect of our tech. It didn't end up being that interesting overall in the end. but it was kind of like a cool thing that we could talk about.
Okay.
But then we were just trying to compete with Amazon. Some parts of our strategy, we had this one thing that we called 100 tiny touch points, and it was about just having a really great shopping experience for people, all the way to little details like the first trial users of our system, the first like a few, I think first 100 of them or something like that. Everyone in the company, or a lot of people in the company, sent them like personalized notes. So like I wrote a bunch of cards saying, "Hi, so-and-so, I'm Leo, a member of the engineering team at Jet. We really appreciate that you've been trying our product," and all that sort of stuff. So I wrote like a bunch of those notes to people, and then once in a while somebody would tweet about it, say, "Hey, like I got this note from you." But the idea is that we were looking at these little details about how to make the shopping experience great, and so part of what we were trying to do is create this like cool brand that appealed to millennials, and it was kind of this new thing, new kid on the block that does things better. But we changed this part of the business model where it was going to be the subscription based thing. That changed before we launched. One of the things we saw was that basically on the one hand, it was a source of friction to onboard, right? People don't want to pay. So we had this free trial period, but at the end of the trial, we realized that we were basically able to just, mark up the items and still be very competitive. And so we dropped the subscription model, but everything else was the same, right? We're still building the website, still planning to compete with Amazon. We did discuss very early on, and even during my interview, they did discuss various exit strategies. So Walmart was already on the table. We thought that might be a potential exit partner. We actually thought that Google might be a partner because they kind of do their Google Ventures thing, and they were actually an investor. They invested in Jet.
Okay.
Even thought Microsoft might be a partner if they were interested in getting into e-commerce. Google has tried to do e-commerce, right? You guys might remember like Frugal, all that sort of stuff, Google Shopping. And I guess the perception overall is that Google wasn't really able to figure it out. Like they didn't, they have a shopping product, but nobody thinks about Google when they think about shopping. People think about Amazon, they don't think about Google. And so, but we thought maybe Google is a partner. Maybe they want to get into e-commerce, and then this would be their way in. And so we had these exit strategies planned, but nevertheless, we were competing with Amazon. So that if you ask me in 2013, 2014, what are you doing? I'm saying I'm building a competitor to Amazon. And so we launched it in 2015, and we had a really good first day. So obviously we didn't know what was going to happen. We kind of had targets for the sales we expected to make. So we were expecting to make $300,000 in sales on our first opening day, but we ended up making closer to 2 million. And so it was a lot more popular than we expected it to be. We had a lot of traffic. The system was barely hanging on. And another issue we had, which was pretty interesting, was one of the technical challenges we had was that was getting the correct product information. And it gets really difficult when it comes to distinguishing between different pack sizes. So you might have a water bottle individually, you might have a pack of 6, a pack of 12, a whole box, a pallet. And so you might have a product that says water bottle in the description, then you don't necessarily know how much water. And so we had this challenge where we had a bunch of products, but some of them had the wrong pack quantity, as we called it. Mm-hmm. And so before we launched, I remember I had a conversation with Mark Laurie, and I was working on the product catalog system. That was like my system, the product catalog and search system. And so he was asking me like, do you think we're ready to launch? And I'm aware of all the matching issues we had. I'm kind of freaking out thinking, no, we have a lot of mismatches. And then, he kind of looked at me and said, I think we're ready. And so, so we did it, but it was pretty interesting because one of the things that happened was launching the website publicly was a great way to identify all the packing issues, because we had a bunch of orders. So we had these funny stories about how somebody ordered water and then they get a call from the shipping company saying, "Sir, we don't know how we can get this pallet into your Brooklyn apartment." So we had a bunch of situations like this. Some people had like, they buy it like a roll of tinfoil and you get like a whole carton of it. But we very quickly found found all the issues. So all the gamers out there that were looking for things like that, they helped us find these issues. We had to like cancel some of those orders, but basically that was an interesting way to resolve these matching issues for us. And so we had a very good first day. And we kind of surpassed our expectations. And so then I think that the executive team kind of had the vision what they were going to do next. Because I think at that point they were already considering an exit partner like Walmart. But nevertheless, from our perspective, we just launched the product. We were trying to operate it, make it better. And so this kind of next year after we launched was about the fact that we have a company that seems to work. We have a formula that works. We just need to scale it. So we were scaling it, and we as the team, we weren't ready to be acquired. And in fact, all of us thought it was way too early when we were acquired by Walmart. And we remember that because there's the executive team and they were making those decisions, and obviously they would talk to us, but there was still like a decision that they made. But I remember there was this period where like they had a meeting in the boardroom, and one of the slides was set at the bottom, Jet, a Walmart company. And so we were like, what is that? And so there's like these rumors about getting acquired by Walmart. And I even remember Mark Laurie, he after we launched, he kind of had a meeting with all the senior executives, and he just had a one-on-one meeting with each of them. And it was also an interesting meeting because I'm talking to him, and I think in his mind he was already kind of like done with Jet in a sense. Like we did it. We're already going to be acquired. Kind of like we're done basically. But then from my perspective, I'm freaking out because we're trying to scale the technology. There's all these fires that we're fighting. And I just remember like having a weird vibe for him because I'm like freaking out about all the problems that we have, and he's kind of like chilling, and he's like, yeah, everything's good, the hardest challenge is behind us. And then that was really a foreshadow to the fact that I think they were already in talks to be acquired by Walmart. But yeah, we were acquired, and it was announced in August of 2016. So it was basically 3 years after I joined. And like I said, we all thought it was very early in a sense that we thought that we could increase the value of the company even more, right? So we sold basically at $10 per share, but some of us thought we were going to get to like $50 a share. And so it was a little bit like anticlimactic in a sense that we're like, oh, this is great, but like maybe we could have had a lot more value if we just spent one more year trying to build it up. But of course, at the end of the day, it's a once in a lifetime kind of event to acquire it at the scale. So it was very exciting for all of us. But it was also an interesting start to the next chapter of what happened to Jet, which was basically that we were acquired and swallowed up by Walmart, and Jet, as it was when we were around, sort of disappeared, and it was shut down eventually, and we were kind of distributed through Walmart. And so it's like this company that we built was absorbed and dissolved throughout the whole Walmart family.
So did Walmart buy your technology, and then they just swallowed the technology, and they still use what you guys created, right?
Yeah. So part of what they were buying, right, is number one, it was they were buying Mark Laurie. They thought like, okay, we just need this guy to join us and make some things happen. Okay. But they were also interested in the technology that we built, because that wasn't really part of the strategy originally, but we created a very strong technology brand. We were very modern in our software development practices. We took some interesting approaches to system architecture that were very forward thinking. We were using like a cool programming language, a functional programming language called F#. So we had like a very cool tech brand. And not only did we have a cool tech brand, but we built some really cool technology. And so some of our systems, when we were acquired, we were looking at our system and evaluating what's going to happen to the system now. Some systems were deprecated, but some systems we decided this system is better than what Walmart has, and they were repurposed to serve all of Walmart rather than Jet. And that was a big reason for Walmart to acquire us as well. They wanted to. It was kind of like a acqui-hire but they also wanted to get this engineering expertise, and they definitely got what they wanted. I would say, from if you look at the Walmart stock price, it basically doubled around that time that a jet was sold. Hasn't really budged too much since then, but they definitely increased the value of the company, and moreover, once Mark Lowry was at the helm of Walmart e-commerce, he was able to grow like 30% every year for several years as he was there. So I think they got what they were looking for, and certainly the technology side, they got a lot of good stuff. But as it happened from the perspective of the engineering team at Jet, we felt like our strong engineering culture was dissolved in Walmart, and it was like a different mentality, different kind of people, and so there's a little bit of territorial behavior on the part of Walmart, because they have a huge engineering team, obviously a huge platform that they operate, and now like there's this hot new startup Jet that's going to come in and change all the ways that you do things. So there's a lot of territorial behavior on part of Walmart, because they didn't want to relinquish control of what they had. They didn't want to face change. Nobody wants to hear that whatever you've been doing isn't good enough. We got to do better. And so there's cultural clashes that we had with the team at Jet and the teams at Walmart. So I guess what I'm getting at is, after the acquisition, things became less exciting, and it was more about maintaining the status quo than building something new. It was about aligning with Walmart, and having to deal with a group of engineers that weren't as enthusiastic about some of the things that we're doing, just not excited, and it just wasn't not as positive of an experience that we had up to that point. But yeah.
Okay, so you got a nice paycheck from Walmart. Do you want to talk about the numbers, or you want to avoid
I could
that?
give you a rough idea. It was not that much money.
Okay.
I mean, I made less than $10 million.
Okay. It's a good amount.
And I mean, a relative. So I mean, I had a pretty big chunk being the first employee, right? Like I basically had one of the biggest employee chunks that we've had in the company. The founder, so Mark Lowry, he obviously made the most money, and then his co-founding team, they basically had like 10 times less equity than him, and then I had about 10 times less than this founding team.
Okay.
And so that's kind of that should give you a close enough
Sure.
idea. So it was like the money I had was sort of, there's this idea of like FU money. And so I would say FU money is more than 10 million. Everything below that isn't quite FU money. and so, but with that said, obviously it was a huge amount of money, especially for me. And I could have, in theory, I did think about the fact that, well, I could probably not work anymore, and I could just make money in the stock market. And that was one of the things I was thinking about. Of course, I think anybody would, right? Like that's one of the things you always think about is, I want to have a financial outcome where I don't have to work anymore, and I have the freedom to do what I want. So that was certainly something I was thinking about, but I also knew, it's not quite enough to really not ever work. So that's part of the reason why I thought, like, well, if only we spent another year building this thing, I would have had a lot more money.
Definitely.
But yeah, so that was with all that said, right? It's still just such a fortunate event with all the things that took place, and in only 3 years, we have this great outcome. But I mean, the other thing you learn, right, is that the amount of equity people get in startups is actually pretty low, right? So I feel like I had quite a bit of equity, but then
what percent was that?
It was less than like 1% or something like that. It was pretty low. And the other factor there was that, I think if you're joining a startup where nobody knows what they're doing, you can ask for more equity, right? But in this case, the team was so experienced, it just felt like they could have done this without us, like it was just sort of, because some people did complain saying, oh, we should have gotten more equity and all that stuff. But I think what we got was more than fair. But we did kind of see, we had this thing where basically what everybody got was publicized internally in the company. So all the top 50 people it was all public to everybody. It was seeing exactly how much money, what you were granted, when,
Sure.
and all the money that you got. So obviously that was somewhat uncomfortable for some people, especially because like the early people just had a lot more equity. And then us, the early group, we had even more equity than the rest of the team. And then on top of that, I had basically double the equity of any other engineer, just because like I interviewed very well and I said like, hey, you guys really need me. And so I kind of really bargained for more. Again, I didn't know what I was doing. Had I known what I was getting into, I would have been too fearful to bargain like that. But I was like, no, I know you guys need me. So they gave me double the equity. And that was another interesting thing, because I didn't share that with the rest of the team, right? It was, we didn't, everybody knew what their equity was and they thought I had the same, but I actually had more. When everybody found out, it was fine, but like some people were a little bit upset.
Sure.
So
Mark got the most, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So Mark got the most.
How much did he get?
So he got, based on the numbers, he got like $300 million.
Okay.
A little bit more. But the thing is that he got that in the form of Walmart equity, part of that. And so he had to stay with Walmart for 5 years. And so a lot of the equity he got with Walmart doubled because the Walmart stock price increased. So he's a billionaire at this point, not just from this, but from all these other ventures he's involved with. But yeah, he had the most. He was like the founder. And then the co-founding team was people he worked with before. And they got basically like each of them got like 40 million. And I got, less than that.
So, well, still less than 10 mil, that's still a lot of money for most people. What did you decide to do, Leo, with the money? Like, did you invest most of it in the stock market? Did you buy real estate? What did you do with it?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean,
I've
never had that kind of money before, so I had to figure out what I wanted to do with it. But yeah, the first thing, I just put it in a bank. I didn't really use it right away. The other factor was that I was still employed by Walmart, and I had to stay around for another like couple of years to get my full equity. And so yes, I mean, I put it in the bank, and then I put it into a mutual fund, and then I bought some real estate. And yeah, that's kind of, I haven't touched most of that money since then until Alvis came around. I mean, when we were acquired by Walmart, I also had the Walmart salary was very big with all the stock, with all the like the RSUs, the restricted stock units, and all the cash bonuses and all that stuff. That was also a kind of income I hadn't really seen before. I was making like $500,000 or $600,000 per year. And I hadn't seen that kind of money before that. And on top of all this equity size. So I was just, I didn't really do much with it. I was trying to figure out what to do with it. And then I stayed I left Walmart at the beginning of 2019. And so then I did take some time off of work. I took about 6 months off, and I was just hanging out, traveling.
Where'd you go?
Living the life. I went to a bunch of places. I went to Argentina. I spent a week in Argentina. And then I went on a trip across Europe. I just flew into Madrid, Spain, one way. And then I just kind of went day by day, figuring out where I wanted to go next. And then I went to Barcelona by train, and then I went to France, Marseille. I went to Nice, and then I went to Italy and Greece. Then later that year, I visited Russia and Latvia. I'm from Latvia originally, so I visited there. And I actually remember this point when I was in Moscow, and I'm sitting at an Airbnb that I got, and it was summertime, and I'm sitting there. It's like on the roof, and I'm watching the sunset, and I'm thinking, I'm not very happy, and I'm thinking like, why not? Like I have basically the life of my dreams. I don't really have to work anymore. I'm still young. I have the world at my fingertips, but I wasn't very happy. I was kind of depressed. And the reason was that I didn't have a job and I didn't have anything to do. And that's what was really making me upset and depressed. And kind of, I just had this negative outlook on life because I didn't have a purpose anymore. I didn't have a job anymore. And so that lasted a few months, but eventually I started doing this consulting work. So some of the people from Jet, they moved on. They went to other startups. And they'd reach out to me to come help with their startup. And so I worked with a company called Luminary. It's a podcasting company. They were building a podcasting platform. You guys might know Russell Brand. He's one of their podcasters.
Okay.
So I was doing that consulting. It was like a part-time thing, but it was very, very important for me to have a chance to just do work. And it was also cool because I could charge a lot of money for my time now that Jet.
How much were you charging?
Well, I started charging 500 per hour, and then I moved up to 1,000 per hour.
Nice.
It's
amazing.
Kind of insane. Because I was charging 500 per hour, and they were happy to pay that. But then, like, I see that, like, they really, really need me, and I figured, well, they're a well-funded company. They don't know what the heck they're doing, so why not charge some more?
Yeah, definitely. So you're doing some tech stuff with them.
Yeah, I was basically acting as like their CTO, right? They needed some guy to come in to set the tech strategy, get the team together, and just a lot of what I was doing at Jet. And it was a cool experience in the sense that Jet was outside of the financial outcome, which was obviously important. I think the biggest takeaway from Jet for me was just all the experience that I got. I had front row seats to see how a company is born, grown, launched, and then acquired in a very short duration of time. And I still feel today that this is the biggest thing. This is my biggest paycheck from Jet, is I had an opportunity to work with a tremendously talented and experienced team. And I had the opportunity to make a lot of mistakes. And the one good thing I did was I learned from them, and I learned from them, and I tried to share my learnings with other people. And so a lot of my consulting was just like letting people pick my brain. And it was kind of very cool. You just show up and people just take notes. And I was doing that for a while, but I also wasn't really happy. And I thought about a full-time role at Luminary. I was doing consulting at other companies. And I thought a little bit about, just building a consulting business. But then I realized that consulting isn't really what I want to do. My old boss at Jet, who was a big influence on me in my career, his name is John Turek. He was before Jet, he was running the ad serving platform at Google. So you might imagine that's pretty important for them. So he brought this level of rigor and intensity that we hadn't seen before. And he'd always make this kind of a jab of a statement to say that if you don't know how to do, teach. If you don't know how to teach, consult. So he had this he was like a doer type, and he had this slightly cynical outlook on people that were overly caught up in theory and all that stuff. And I realized that's what I ended up being. I ended up being this consultant, it's just fun, but you don't have that sense of ownership. Like, you don't have the sense that, hey, this is my baby. I'm working on it and I care about it. And so I kind of struggled with the consulting work, and I was kind of looking for the next thing I wanted to do. I had, some amount of funds. Of course, it wasn't really enough to really create a startup using only those funds. And then eventually I met Nick, and it was just an amazing opportunity. Certainly having the Jet money helped with that.
Okay, so you meet Nick, who's the CEO of Alvis, and like, how did you both meet, and how did you get to build a new company together?
So it was a very random connection through my sister. So my sister and my dad had actually already met with Nick like 10 years ago, back when he was doing, one of the things he was trying to do back then is create like a school and for kids, I believe. And my dad, he has like a background in education, creating schools and all that stuff. So somehow he found my dad and my sister. That was 10 years ago, and they spoke, and but then nothing came of it. But then about 2 years ago, my sister and my mom and my daughter, they were all going to vacation in Mexico, and they ran into Nick and his family, who were going to the same place. And they were like, oh, hey. So they randomly connected just by such a small chance, running into each other at the airport. And then my sister mentioned me, and Nick knew about jet.com, and he was like, whoa, so you have a brother that knows how to build tech. We need to talk. And so my sister told me about it, and I said, okay. I had no idea who he was. And I was like, oh, here's some guy that wants to do a startup. I didn't think much of it. At that point, I was still thinking about growing my consulting business, all that sort of stuff. And then I met Nick, and we spoke, and we had good synergy. And I thought, wow, this guy knows what he's doing. And he kind of told me a bit about the auto hauling market, which is the one that I've been kind of eyeing. And he told me very quickly, he's like, Sure, that's a great market, but it's a fraction of the size of the bigger freight market. So it doesn't make sense to go after auto hauling. We got to go after the whole thing. But we spoke, and I was very, very impressed right away because he already built technology. He showed it to me, and I was like, "Wow, you guys built this yourself?" And I remember I was speaking to him recently because he was like, "Yeah, I remember talking to you back then, and I couldn't understand why you were so surprised that we built this thing, right?" But now he understands because he sees all the friction that's involved in building such a massive product. It's a lot of work. You have to be very detailed. You have to have a lot of engineering skill on the one hand, but you also have to be very organized. You have to be able to communicate your ideas, and so this is what companies fail to do well. This is the reason. This is part of the reason we're able to compete, is that we have a principled approach to software engineering. But anyway, he'd already built Alvis, and I was very shocked that he was able to pull it off because they have a fully functional product that's running in the cloud. They have a team that's able to fix issues. And so my job was going to be simple. You take this thing that I've built and just turn it into a world-class multi-tenant piece of infrastructure. And so it's like we kind of have product market fit. We have demand. And so my job seemed very, very easy. It just grow the team, grow the technology. This is something I know how to do. And so I was really excited to join. I was almost feeling kind of like this is, like quote unquote too easy, in a sense that like I was hoping to have a bit more time earlier to have greater influence on this first version of the product. A lot of the things we're doing now is refactoring and re-engineering our system to meet the needs of a growing organization. But it was just like a perfect package for me as to what Nick had. And we also it was also clear that we complement each other's skill sets. Our personalities, our expertise is very complementary. And it is actually, it is somewhat of a rare thing for co-founders to work out together. For people to work together, they have to be able to see eye to eye and rely on each other, trust each other. And so Nick and I, we were a really good fit in that sense as well, as to what we're able to do, our skill sets. And so the first a few months as we were working together, we didn't really have a plan. Like we didn't say, okay, I'm joining Alvis as a co-founder. We were just talking. We didn't really land on the name Alvis yet. Like he already had it, but you may be thinking about other names. And we were just talking. I'd come in. This was in Denver, actually. We have this, where his brokerage, Archer Hub, has an office here. I would come in every day. We'd just start talking about things like, we're going to raise money. Here's what we're doing. Here's the vision. And we were just kind of working together. And that's how we learned, like, hey, I think we make a good team. And we were going to raise, Nick was planning to raise right away. He thought, okay, I got Leo now, I got a tech guy, so we can easily raise. And we were getting offers. It was possible for us to raise, but only a seed round. We weren't a Series A type of level. And this was a learning experience for both of us to find out, how do you sequence the financing rounds? What does each round mean? What do you need to be? Where do you need to be to make it to Series A, Series B, and so on? But that's our story.
So with that seed round, and could you go into detail, Leo, why you couldn't go into Series A? I'm kind of just curious from my. I'm always fascinated by venture capital. So if you could tell me why you couldn't get into Series A right away.
Yeah, and please take it with a grain of salt. Like, I'm not a VC expert, and I didn't know any of this before I got in. So this is what I've learned, and so a part of it is I think they just have rough guidelines about what does it mean for a company to be at seed stage versus Series A. And at Series A, the idea is that you should have a mature product, but you should also have a certain number of customers and recurring revenue. And you need to be able to prove that you have a formula that works, where you could spend more on marketing, get more customers, and grow the business that way. So that's what they look for on a Series A. And we weren't at that level. We had a product that was mature enough to be Series A product. We just didn't have all the customers. And so that's kind of a big factor, big shift between seed round and Series A. At Series A, you have to have customers, you have to have a marketing plan, and you have to have a formula that works. You have to be able to forecast financials. Like, you have to think in terms of like customer acquisition cost and all those sorts of things.
And you were turned off by the seed round, right? You didn't want to do a seed round.
Well, yeah, so we didn't want to do a seed round because
Why is that? Yeah,
because first of all, the valuation would be very small
Okay.
compared to this. So we were going to give up a much larger chunk of the company for not as much money. We were getting offers to raise up to like 5 million, but I think they wanted like 10% of the company or 20%, just a huge chunk. And so we said, okay, well, we have our own funds that we could use. Why don't we just spend a year working on this? And I actually was very interested in this option because I was like, well, I need to work on this a little bit. Like, how am I going to raise money for something I didn't really work on? And so I was very much looking forward to actually building the company. And I guess part of what Nick was thinking, right, is like, he didn't know who I was. He didn't really know me. And so he was thinking, okay, this guy has a name. Maybe we can raise on the basis of his name, and then we'll see what happens then. But I think one of the things we learned is that, hey, we can actually build this company. Like, we don't need to raise right away. We can actually do this ourselves, both in terms of financing, but also in terms of the two of us being able to kind of figure out the next steps without having to hire a bunch of people. And so that's what we decided to do. So I just, since that point, I kind of, we stopped thinking so much about the fundraising. At the beginning, we spent a lot of time, and that was actually a good exercise to pitch, to make a presentation, to actually distill down to a few bullet points what Alvis really is, what our value proposition is. Very, very important exercise for us. We got a chance to speak to a lot of VCs, got some practice speaking their lingo, answering their questions properly, knowing what they're looking for. But that was the first few months of us doing that. But then I just heads down, joined with the engineering team, and I've been in the trenches with them ever since, just working on the product. And this is the ideal. This was the ideal scenario for me, because if I'm thinking that we need to raise a Series A at a certain valuation, if we want to have $100 million valuation for Alvis, well, from my perspective, we need to put in some work into our technology to make it worth that, to really create an organization, to really create a technical strategy, and to make sure that we're able to scale. This sort of system at this sort of scale ends up being very complicated. There's a lot of sophisticated engineering practices we have to use in order to really meet our scaling needs. And that doesn't happen overnight. We need the best of the best engineers. We need them to be familiar with using the most modern tools like the cloud, these non-relational databases, the new features of programming languages. All those things we have to rely on to be a market leader, and that doesn't happen overnight. The engineers, they love to learn, but at the end of the day, there's a big range of skill sets with engineers, right? It's kind of like we need our engineers to perform at NBA level, but they're more like minor league type of players. And so my biggest job has been training the engineering team to perform at a much higher level. But I thought that was going to be one of our competitive advantages, the way that we run our engineering team. And so I'm really glad we took this time to work on Alvis before looking at Series A. And
it's really interesting to learn. I know that you have a team in Jamaica and Moldova of engineers. I only have a few minutes left, Leo, because I do have a meeting in 3 minutes. I'm wondering if we could sort of wrap this up, but continue it on the next episode. So if there's anything, like, we could just finish off right now with what is your goal for Alvis? Like, where do you see this? Like, what's your goal this year, and for the next 5 years, what do you want to do?
So my goal from a technology perspective, so we have our business goals, right? And I think maybe you should talk to Nick about the business development goals. My technology goals is to create a very high performing culture, and for the team to be aligned on what our technical vision is, and how do we get there, and to set the foundation for what we're going to do next. Part of the challenge in this industry is the fact that there's so many different workflows, so many different use cases, that if you don't have a principled approach to discovery, to understanding those use cases, and then if you don't have a principled approach to actually building the system to support that, right? If every feature you build is like a new system that you're slapping together, that's just not going to scale. So we have to sort of spend some time sharpening our saw, so to say, to improve our engineering process, improve the tooling that we have, make sure that we're adhering to consistent coding guidelines, consistent operational guidelines. And the operational aspect is also very important. Like I said, my boss at Jet, he was running operations on the Google ad serving platform. And so operations, when it comes to software engineering, is just the idea of making sure that your system is up and running, making sure it's performing, not having a lot of errors, the users are having a good experience. So that's another thing that software companies can overlook. They think that once they push it out into the cloud, their job is done. But the reality is that you have to have a very hands-on approach to system operations and having on-call rotation, monitoring, alerting, doing post-mortem analysis, root cause analysis, all these things that are part of the operational workflow, we have to get a lot better at. And so that's the other part of my goal over the next year, is to really scale the engineering team as an organization, to be able to grow the team, grow our technology, and prepare for the next tier of scaling, so to say. As we onboard more and more customers, there's certain things we're going to have to re-engineer. And I'm just getting the team ready to do that.
Is this more difficult than Jet.com, or is it more or less the same?
There's different challenges, right? So on the one hand, I came prepared. All my learnings from Jet in terms of technology and teams, I documented them, put them into our information system. We use Notion. And so I'm very much prepared in that sense, in a technical sense and a management sense. I definitely have my plan. But then on the other hand, we do have challenges. We have an engineering team that's less experienced than what we had at Jet. At Jet, right away, they hired like as senior of engineers as they could. They threw money at us. We don't have that kind of money at Alvis at this point. So we're having to get by with less.
Sure.
It's a different set of challenge. The other challenge is that we're more of a remote first company at Alvis. We have the Jamaica team. I'm in Denver. Nick is in San Diego. Ava is in Atlanta. Somebody else.
And you're building an office in San Diego. I saw the photo.
Yeah, we're building office in San Diego. And so we have a major chunk of people in Jamaica, a major chunk in Moldova. The rest of us are thrown around. And that's also a challenge, right? We're trying to create this like great culture in Moldova remotely over a Teams call. And I'm sometimes still surprised how it actually works.
Sure. Leo, I do apologize. I do have to get going for a meeting, but absolutely loved our conversation. We could continue this next week, do part 2. Maybe Nick's going to hopefully be feeling better, so we can get Nick in the conversation and talk more about Alvis. And well, thank you so much, Leo. And stay in touch.
Likewise. Thank you.
See you, Leo. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.